Hey, what's going on, ReFi Nation? Super grateful to have a conversation with Kieran and Andrew from Return, two good friends of mine who are about to drop a beta version of their application, which makes it very easy for anybody to take climate impact on-chain in just a few clicks without having to worry about how to calculate emissions, which carbon credits to source, how to do retirements. All of the complexity is taken away, and it's incredibly easy. So take a look at the conversation, but first and foremost, go to return.green, sign up for the wait list, and mint one of these soul-bound NFTs to show your climate impact and to make it automatic. Preview of the conversation, we go into the top level vision for Return, how they're starting at this particular piece and growing into something much bigger. We dig beneath the surface of their technical implementation, both how they calculate emissions and how the system works in terms of the architecture decisions they've made, the balance between centralization and decentralization. We go into some pretty good detail here, and I think for builders in the space who want to get involved, this is a great conversation. And for people who want to glimpse what is Web3 and how does it work, it definitely is further down the rabbit hole, but I think a lot of you will really benefit from it. We'd also very much appreciate anybody to give a review if you'd enjoyed listening to these episodes so far, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or on Google Podcasts. Taking a few moments to write a review and share it makes a massive difference. We do want to get the story of ReFi out to as many people as possible. The Climate Symphony needs everybody in it. Talent and capital is always welcome. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. What's going on, Kieran? How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. How about yourself, John?
Man, loving the Portugal vibes, digging, having sunshine, nice and friendly people, meeting ReFi friends at the co-working space, was hanging out with Gilad from BitGreen the other day, and yeah, feeling like it's been a good decision. What's up with you, Andrew? Are you tired of slaving away at the coding machine yet? Are you still loving it?
Never get tired of it. It's all been good. We're really finishing up on the system. Architecture is designed, implementing the last few things, and then, yeah, it's all been going well.
Amazing. Well, I'm super stoked to talk to you guys. I know you've been prepping for this last stretch for a while, and figure we can kind of start at the top, give people a sense of what is Return and why does it matter, how does it fit within the broader climate action movement. And then I think it'd be great to dive into some more of the technical mechanics and, you know, some of the specific implementation decisions you guys have made, and start to, you know, forecast of what it looks like if Return's a great success. What's going to be built on top of this? What can come out of it? So yeah, I'll jump in with you, Kieran. You know, I've got a good sense of what you guys are doing, but for somebody who doesn't know anything about Return, what is it and who's it for?
Yeah, absolutely. So the mission and why we started Return really is to sort of accelerate the adoption of regeneration broadly. But I think initially it was really just to accelerate the adoption of ReFi and specifically sort of on-chain assets. And so really what Return is to start is really simple, trying to be the most simple, easiest way to access environmental assets on chain, but sort of more importantly, really trying to make it so that it's incentivized and fun. And sort of our grand thesis has always been to sort of leverage the tooling that Web3 has provided to solve the problems that Web2 has had in terms of sort of business and consumer focused offsetting adoption. And so really what Return is, to start with anyway, that's coming very soon, is that we're a really easy way to calculate your on-chain emissions, stake capital, and then put that yield from the stake capital towards either on-chain assets or to a community pool. And once you do that, we issue you a soul-bound token, which lives in your wallet, which becomes your physical representation of your climate impact. It's dynamic, it morphs over time. And so really trying to bring in these sort of nice bits and pieces to make sure that it's really easy to sort of take climate action. It's fun to take climate action, and you can do it collaboratively. And so that is for anyone on Web3 that is a user. We're sort of currently evaluating a few business propositions as well. So yeah, anyone that has assets on chain, it's a very fun, easy way to sort of contribute and be a part of ReFi and the climate movement. So yeah.
So as somebody who cares about the planet and knows that interacting on chain has some emissions associated with, I can very easily use return to offset my emissions and basically not have to worry about the technical details, but just let you guys kind of get the system rolling and forget about the rest. What's actually like going on under the scene, Andrew? Kieran mentioned specifically like staking, off calculating emissions, staking, and what are the different pieces of the system and how does it actually work under the hood?
Yeah, so in the beginning, user would come onto our site, make a couple of decisions, deciding if they want to be in that community pool, if they want to individually contribute. We then go and calculate their emissions. We're doing that cross-chain. So initially we have 8 chains that we're calculating on and working on implementing more.
Did you just say 8?
Yeah, so four pretty simple EVM chains. So chains built off the Ethereum system. So the same address, and then working on Bitcoin and some others. We'll announce them once we've finished the implementation. But making it really easy for you to see your blockchain impact on any blockchain, all built initially on Polygon. And then once you see your historic emissions and what you're doing on an ongoing basis, you can make a decision of if you want to offset your historic emissions in bulk, or just continue on to do the stake, or you would deposit funds. Now, initially, we'll probably have a couple options, USDC, maybe DAI, potentially Matic or wrapped ETH. And then those funds would go directly to a single-sided liquidity pool in Aave so that people don't have to worry about impermanent loss. They just put in the funds, yield starts collecting from market making, and then they can withdraw at any time. So making the cost removed from the equation of doing good for the planet and really just making it like a savings account for your assets where the yield is going to good. And then in the background, we'll be continuing to watch that yield collect over certain periods of time. We'll take that yield, we'll swap it back to a currency that can be either converted or traded for a carbon credit, or we can just deposit it directly into the community pool, where at certain intervals, quarterly, monthly, we'll see what the community wants. We'll be able to go and collectively have the community vote and see what they want to do on a larger scale to regenerate.
Okay, beyond just offsetting. So the community pool has capital that accrues, which can be allocated towards any particular climate impact. Is that right?
Whatever the community decides. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the really cool things we'd like to do with the community pool is treat it as if you're putting, so, and the emphasis is very much on regeneration. Whilst you do have the sort of on-chain emissions, we're really trying to make it so that if you want to put whatever capital that is, just informed capital with your on-chain emissions to on-chain assets, absolutely fine. Go through things like NCT to start with. But if you do want to do that community pool, we see that as a bit of a testing ground for the community. So sort of there's things like futures contracts, bringing those on chain, and however you can sort of do some really cool and innovative things with that. We see that as a nice way to sort of test those out.
Fascinating. No, I like the new additions. It seems like even just over the last 6 weeks, you guys have really refined and grown the concept a lot. How does this differ to what else is in the market? What comes to mind in particular? Spiral's protocol and Celo. I don't know as much about Menthol, but I know they're in a similar space. What else is adjacent to you guys? If you don't mind just giving us a landscape overview and then drill into how you guys are different and what your thesis is about, how this fits into the rest of the ecosystem.
Yeah, I'll go first and then Andrew will, I'm sure, jump in with other stuff that I forget. So I think really that there's a lot going on chain right now. And I think a lot of the things we are building are really just cued on the fact that we believe that we're solving a tangible problem. And that problem being that taking climate action has initially been very boring. We just want to make it easy and enticing to do so. And sort of with that thesis in place, I think people like Spiral, so Doug and Helena, who are amazing, are so obviously like really trying to focus on this staking aspect. And people like Menthol, who are also doing great things, and we're really trying to focus on the offsetting aspect. And so really where we see ourselves is probably a bit of a blend of both, but also really trying to make sure that yes, you can stake. Yes, you offset your emissions, but it's really just trying to tie it into a product that makes it really enticing to do so. And it allows you to build with community, and it sort of allows you to take collaborative climate action. And this is just sort of an MVP of what we're trying to prove out right now. And so I think that's really where we're trying to sort of set our stall and try and prove out the thesis. So yeah, but obviously, like, we can all do this together. So always collaboration is king when it comes to that. Andrew, I don't know if I missed anything there.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I think just to kind of reemphasize, we're really adding in social proof and giving you the ability to show off what you've done, share it with others, bring it to social media, make it your profile picture, do essentially whatever you'd like to do to show that you're green and that you're making an impact and regenerating. And I think that's a big unlock in this space, because in Web 2, that wasn't really possible. A lot of it's, behind closed doors, opaque what's happening. And with Web 3, what us and those other people you talked about, it is all in public and everyone can see what's happening. So we really want to tie in what you're doing to your identity, and do that with that soulbound token.
It's fascinating. You guys are bringing in the identity piece and social proof to be able to help make people feel successful about doing these actions that so many people want to do, but often either don't know how or find it difficult. What does that actually look like, though? What does celebrating somebody's climate action through return look like on social in particular?
I think we're really trying to figure that out as well. I think where we're building right now, and sort of when things come out very soon, there'll be a placeholder in terms of like how that actually tangibly looks. But I think for us, it's really trying to find, and probably building it with the community, really figuring out like where is the in-between of a bit like a passport, which sounds really boring, but it's efficient and it gives you details, compared to like this living, breathing image or piece of art that like morphs and grows over time. And I think like we've definitely lent towards maybe the art aspect, but I think we're really trying to find that mix, because I feel like we've never had these tools before in history. And so how can you like really enable both a user and a business, like whoever offsets or sort of take climate action on chain, like how do you make it something that like people are proud to show, that I feel that is much more than like a retirement certificate. So that's totally. We're really trying to figure that out at the moment. So yeah.
And technically, how does that work? So you have this soulbound token. Is it a dynamic NFT that updates with, an aggregate amount of retirements made? Like, how is the data coming into the system? And then what are the money Legos that people could potentially use to build upon to then, maybe experiment, like you said, with different expressions of celebrating climate action on chain? I'll pass that one to you, Andrew.
Yeah, initially it's going to be more of a static NFT in the smart contract side, where we're hosting the NFT metadata on AWS so that we can go and recurringly update users. So as you're offsetting or regenerating, as you're transacting on blockchain and your emissions go up, we're able to continuously calculate that in real time and to continue to update the metadata of your NFT, as well as update the images and allow more images or more potential mutations or upgrades over time to be on your soulbound token. The one issue we had with hard coding in a dynamic morphing structure on chain is that limits us to whatever we can create initially without having to go through a hard upgrade. So as we're going into the beta and starting out with these initial waves, it really allows us to continue evolving and continuing to add more information to track what you're doing, potentially more connections to other protocols or to other communities, as well as giving you the image to, down the line, customize your NFT if you'd like it, so that we don't have to have it as some sort of hard set rule, but really, well, it's your identity. You'll be the one who has the access to change that. And as long as you log in with your wallet, you'll be the only one able to change your identity.
Cool. Super interesting. It reminds me of a project I was speaking to yesterday, two founders from Estonia called Dotiland, where they're building impact selves. So it seems, we've definitely been seeing this as a core unlock and opportunity in the space. I'm curious, like, where did the concept for this arise around, here's something that's really easy to do. You can make an impact. You can celebrate this and begin to change the way that we tell stories about ourselves. Where did this idea come from?
I think it's really morphed over time. The initial thesis, the idea that we were like building off, was that they're on-chain emissions. Like you should be able to offset them easily. And then I think very quickly people like Klima came along and sort of made it fairly easy, although it's still, you need to understand things that are going on. Like there's still stuff to build there, but overall, like it needed to be far simpler. And especially with the merge coming, I think it's much more around like how can we leverage these tools to like spur action rather than just like be almost like responsive to something, but trying to be proactive at the same time. And like that's an age old thing that as we were building like Return, like no one hasn't been figured out yet, and whether we're the ones to figure that out, we don't know. We hope so, and that would be great for the planet. But yeah, so it's really morphed over time from that initial thesis. And I mean, yeah, Andrew has had a lot to do that as well. It's not only me, but yeah.
What's your journey technically implementing this been like, Andrew? Have you been playing around with smart contracts for a while, or is this your first Web3 rodeo? Like, give us a sense of how your, journey's been as an engineer in this space, applying these new tools to address these problems.
Yeah, initially I got into Web3 back in 2016. With a friend, we set up quite a few mining rigs for Ethereum in our college dorm. Or a set of college dorms, 6 of them, in fact. And then I kind of stayed in the loop since then, but I hadn't started on the engineering side back then. And then back in 2020, I got kind of reinvigorated by the Web3 rush and started to get more into the smart contract side of it. And in 2021, I fully committed to being a developer in Web3.
Oh, seriously. Amazing. 2021. And here you are leading the charge. That's amazing. I could tell you guys are both insanely bright, and it's amazing to see, the tenacity of, okay, here's an opportunity. We're going to go out there and make this happen. What's been like the hardest part of seeing this vision, being able to get to the starting line, get to the, the point where you can see the finish line? Like, what's been the major obstacle that you guys have found up to this point?
Oh, that's interesting. I feel like we'll both have really like polar opposite answers. I think from my side, this isn't my first startup. I've done before, but I think really there's so many amazing things going on chain right now, and like there's this ReFi thing, but then like blockchain is very new, and like the carbon markets, although they're 20 years old, like it's still new to a lot of people. And so you've got like these 2 or 3 really converging industries. And like, even like, I'm sure like most people who watch this or like are on like the cutting edge of what's going on. And so like where I found like by far the biggest hurdle was really trying to nail down a thesis and problem that is tangible and can be solved. One of the things like I've definitely felt about Web3 in the past is that it's definitely a lot of solutions looking for problems, or just building for the heck of it, which is fine because I feel like that's a lot of what Web3 was initially. But I think, and that's very much where we sort of try to keep our like guiding light almost, is like, are we solving something tangible that makes sense, is a pain point and like matters that we solve? And there's so many because like it's so new. But I think like making sure that we're on track for that, and like either like not allowing ourselves to be diverted to like another problem that comes up or XYZ, I think has been a real challenge for me personally. But yeah, I feel like we've arrived somewhere that like is actually solving that tangible problem and like allows that room for growth. Where the sort of like you can start knocking down as soon as you've knocked down that first door. There's like 5 or 6 that can continue to be knocked down. So yeah, and then Andrew, I don't know how you. I'm sure you'd answer it far differently.
No, I actually think that's a very good answer. I'd say one thing on the technical side is with something that's based on identity, it's really hard to decentralize every aspect of it and encode all of it into a smart contract where it all has to be assigned ahead of time. And you have to somewhat predict the future of what do you want to include in a contract and what do you want to include in the metadata of these things. Makes it a little bit tricky to be able to fully encode an evolving and dynamic soulbound identity on chain. So just finding the right mix of decentralization and authorized access in Web 2 so that users can still control their identity. But to some extent, the vast majority of it is in a smart contract sense, self-securing, where you can't lie about what you're doing. I think finding the perfect mix of those two, where we allow the most usability, but we also don't prevent people from, feeling safe and secure, that what's happening is really happening, and that there isn't any greenwashing going on, has been a challenge. But I think it's something that, although it took a long time to architect the system in a way to optimize for both, we finally gotten there.
Nice. Yeah, I think there's a lot of different experiments going on in the kind of identity space. I know Gitcoin Passport has arrived on a particular architecture. We've looked at Passage Protocol. I know there's also Disco, and the W3C kind of working group seems to have arrived upon particular standards which help inform in this space. Like, what cues are you guys taking from the patterns that are arising around how identity will be managed on chain? Do you feel like there's any very clear trend technically about like, okay, this is where we see things working? Like, I think specifically the choice for you guys to use AWS as opposed to, I know Gitcoin Passport uses like ceramic networks to establish verifiable credentials. Just curious to get a lay of the land a little bit deeper on the technical side of what identity looks like in Web3, if you will, Andrew.
Yeah. AWS, to be honest, was not really a decision made for identity. It was the decision made for the ability to update and calculate users' emissions and regeneration. There's quite a few computations going on at pretty much all times to be able to update and keep track of that. And having the serverless architecture that AWS enables, as well as an easy integration into Web3, made that really simple and made that somewhat of an easy decision. It was the strongest serverless architecture that had all the features that we need, and the most uptime, so that it feels as if it would never go down. Ceramic is a great option. For us, it was a little bit more difficult to do that with the full backend system that tries to keep track of everything that's happening, especially cross-chain. If we were just on like an EVM network, it might be easier. But considering we're going and we're indexing transactions from Bitcoin and from Solana and from other networks, to be able to stay up to date with that stuff, it makes it kind of hard to do that, not on a large scale application that has those functionalities.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And as you're talking, it reminds me of this kind of lurking shadow in the background around privacy, anonymity, and censorship. As you begin to see this system come into fruition, where somebody's identity across multiple chains can be associated potentially to individuals, how do you guys manage privacy, and what are your concerns, and what do you think users should be aware of as they engage with your system?
Yeah, any sort of user data that could be representative of who the person is by no means going to be publicly accessible, potentially not accessible to us either. Still working on that, but likely encrypting it, but it will all be held on a virtual private cloud. So it'll really be quite isolated from the rest of the AWS stack. We have no intention of really linking anything together. Our goal is not to create a honeypot of user data. That being said, AWS does have extremely secure user and access management policies, which can allow users to pass in not just the wallet that they're signing in with, which has caused some front-end hacks in the past, or the ability to misrepresent what wallet you're logging in with, but also the ability to have authorizations go through. And if a user wants to, so to say, log into their account or edit their SBT, you really have to have that wallet connected. There's no way to bypass that. But it's an ongoing challenge and something that we're going to continue developing and trying to find the best way forward with the community who's also trying to do it.
Yeah, interesting. You're making a strong commitment now to say, you're not going to run a kind of data aggregation business model where you're gathering all this data and then, doing the crap Google and Facebook thing and selling people's data onto advertisers. What is the business model? How do you sustain this? And what kind of scale do you need to make this a successful return on investment for, people who've invested in this project to date? I'll pass that on to you, Kieran.
Yeah, we don't have an exact number, but I think it's the business model to start is that we don't have one, to be honest. I think we were super keen on just getting something out, and we've taken a bit of time to ship something because we really wanted to make sure that like we say, it came back to that problem solution thing. Obviously, thing being the main thing that shapes all startups. But yeah. So with that in mind, it was really just to ship it. And so we are treating the first little while as just a test case. And And so beyond that, I think you have the obvious ones of like, if it's offsetting emissions, you can add, you would in theory add in a transaction fee or sort of a typical sort of carrier fee. And then you can sort of add a few other little bits and pieces. So when things are minted and when they're not, and then there's yield aspects, so you might add a little bit there as well. There's sort of a load of different places we could add fees. I think for us right now, it's just really trying to figure out like, is where we've arrived to the right place and what people enjoy using. And if it's not, like, let's adapt it together to really figure out like what that is. And then we'll probably come to fees a little bit later. So our very, very lovely investors will be a little patient, I think.
It's amazing.
While we test that out.
I also just recognize, there is some kind of trend here in Web3. I know some of the main DeFi protocols are kind of valued on potential revenue because of their current usage and adoption. If they were to throw on a fee switch, it's like, okay, we can discount their revenue over this time period, assuming that a fee would be introduced. But actually, it's all about growth and adoption at that stage. What's your guys' growth hypothesis? How do you go to market? How do you get this out into the wilds? What does that look like?
Yeah, it looks like getting in people's hands, but doing that is hard. And so we are starting with a very small beta. So whether we're just sort of playing with whether that will be invite only or whether we'll try and just make sure that we allow it to grow really naturally, but trying to control it so that, again, we can continue to make those adaptations as it comes through. We aren't to start with sort of having something like a Discord channel on purpose, just to make sure that we can really focus on allowing that feedback loop to continue rather than sort of like a test bed for the proverbial sort of hype machine. So that sort of ties in upon sort of, we've lined up a cool, whether we've played with calling it like a launch tool. I don't think we'll quite go that far, but so like we've lined up a really cool set of folks. So people like Toucan and some others who haven't been announced yet, who are like, we really align with in terms of values and sort of how they've built. And they will sort of go through iterations of launching with them and making sure that their communities get access as well, and sort of making sure it's a little more controlled through that thesis. So yeah, that's the current plan. But we're just sort of formalizing that. But yeah, making sure that communities can come on as we go in the right way is super important.
Super cool. Yeah, I think it'd be amazing to see this kind of building block appended to any of the membership kind of NFT projects out there. If this could be something that would be added on to, if you're joining any of these DAOs, like, you're going to have the opportunity to just have automated climate impact as a part of this. I'd be curious to look a little bit deeper. We talked some around the architecture decisions, but I'm curious around like the offsetting side of it. I know these are computations running in the cloud. How do you go about calculating on-chain emissions? What are the underlying assumptions? And, who are you working with to make sure that, these are credible assumptions, but also that you're not expending crazy amounts of resources on tiny transactions that actually have very minimal footprint anyway? Like, what's the dynamic there, Andrew, from your side on the emissions calculation?
Yeah, so we're actually going to be open sourcing our emissions calculations. We spent the last couple months putting quite a bit of work into figuring out the methodology that we want to pursue, really going off of what other people have built and trying to improve the data quality. Don't have too much to give away yet, as we're still finishing up a little bit more and just making sure that we're doing everything right. But what I can say is in the next couple of weeks, we plan to start putting that out and letting people see. I will say we have a ground up approach. So we want to look at everything that goes into making the blockchains run, from, how much it costs from the environmental perspective to get energy in different regions, how many nodes are run in that region. And then we look at that at a global level, try to figure out the whole energy cost of the chain. From there, we try to also figure out, how many people are using the network, how many transactions are using the network. We break it down initially on a day basis, but potentially in the future down to a block level basis.
Wow.
And then really break that down for users on, at what time did you do this transaction? Or what day did you do this transaction? How many other people were transacting that day, split up the costs, but we plan on making it more and more robust over time. But to the point where we won't have to be calling a bunch of APIs to figure out every single transaction a user makes, but keeping it on a more high level, not wasting resources to calculate wasted resources.
Yeah, nice. Well said. It's interesting, in the conversation with Benoit from Vera, there was this seeming misunderstanding on my part around the concept that each additional transaction on a proof of stake chain produces an additional carbon footprint. And in talking to some other more technically savvy people in the space, I learned that's actually not necessarily the case. Can you unfold like how that concept works, where it's like, okay, let's give an example. Here's a carbon credit. It gets traded 100 times before it's retired. Does that mean that each trade incurs an additional carbon footprint, or actually is the model for calculating a carbon footprint of the blockchain just equated at a per transaction level because that's the unit of account? Like, can you unpack this a little bit for us, Andrew, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. So there's kind of two ways to think about it. So there's nodes on the blockchain network, and then there's validators in the blockchain network. What we do is we mainly look at validators, the people who are actually ensuring the continuance of the blockchain, making sure that each block, is right, came from the right parent, is not going the wrong way. And of that, a certain number based on the proof of work chain of blocks and of validators are needed to verify all of that information. So let's just say, not to target any specific chain, that there's 10 validators needed to confirm a transaction on a network, or there's 10 validators needed to confirm a block on a network. Now, if you have 100 transactions in that block, or if you have 100 million transactions in that block, you'll still need those 10 validators. So the amount of data on chain might, increase slightly, considering it's one block out of, maybe a million. There might be a slight increase in the amount of data needed. And for full nodes that have already indexed the historical chain, it's not that much more data. So, there is some variety. But to a large degree, as chains go to scale and as blockchain adoption continues to increase, I don't see the variability in the size of blocks increasing that much, or your transaction, if there's 10 to 100 in a block, making that big of a difference. I think it's just that unit of measurement where you can, say who attributes to the consumption of that block, right? If you have 10 people who made a transaction in that block and who needed that to happen, versus if you have 100, you can split it up 10 ways, 100 ways. You could look at the amount of data that's needed or that fills up the block and see, if it's a full block. If, a ton of people are trying to transact, let's say, we have a big NFT drop, everything gets clogged up. You could look at who's tipping the most. There's a lot of ways you could break it down and try to understand, who's taking up the resources and who's occupying it. But at a high level, we look at the number of transactions and then just divide it out by that. But definitely in the future, there's more room to.
So the number of transactions over a time period are, dividing the actual footprint as determined by the validators in the network with the geographic region and the energy consumption in each region. Okay, super interesting. So you guys are going to a really, really granular level. That's super cool. And that is a building block. If you're, bringing this open source and doing it well for the EVM chain, or I guess it's proof of stake, that's an amazing public good for the space. So kudos you guys for going that deep. Really excited to kind of, see where that goes. Did you want to jump in on anything, Kieran?
No. I mean, it definitely maybe just add a bit of color. Like there was always the option to just use the there's calculators, and there's nothing wrong with them. But I think we were we couldn't sit right on the fact that the calculators are made to be sort of roughly average, and then bring to an average figure and then sort of double it so it's over, and that's great. Obviously you're regenerating more, but it didn't sit right with us that you're not really focusing on what actually happened. It's sort of just pay more. And so what we really and I kid you not, we have an amazing member of the team called Ben, who is far smarter than myself, and sat on the Wayback Machine to figure out the number of nodes for a specific chain on like a specific date. And so like we've gotten like, I'm probably a bit too far at times, but just to try and like really figure out like, what and really how we can add like value to that rather than just like, just layer something on top. So maybe it helps as well.
I think there's immense value in it though, because as we're looking at this regenerative economic movement, there's this whole universe of learning that we all need to go through. And if the future financial system is built on a public ledger, like this is financial education, is the underpinnings of how the system works and how energy consumption, is determined, and what each actor in the system, from those who are transacting to those who are validating, what their role and responsibility is in this. And so I think there's some interesting conversations to have here. It really feels like, my take, just stepping back in terms of where we're at in ReFi, that the Klima Toucan experiment definitely created this initial explosion, and there's no more environmental assets coming on chain through the legacy markets. Guys like you and Senken and Ivy and Atem, like there's this whole next generation of people who are coming on to utilize these assets, but there's kind of like a pause in the incoming supply. What do you guys see is happening in this period, and where do you think this will go, the whole ReFi movement as a whole? Just curious to wax eloquent and just get a sense of where this is headed.
Yeah, now this is my favorite topic. And I know, John, we talk about this a lot, but I'd love your thoughts. I think it's really interesting because we raised private investor rounds, and one of the things that came up quite a lot was like, there's a supply problem. Like, there's no credits coming on chain. Like, what do you do if this blows up? Like, how do you get supply? And I think there's like this weird thing where do you sort of set your tent in like the regen style, like completely governed, like non-Vera, non-gold standard registry. I personally believe in a future like that. Or do you sort of sit in this legacy part? And a big sort of shift that I've had over the past like few months is that, and I think a lot of people come through this relatively early. I think it just took me a little while because I was like very fixed in like ReFi is everything mode. Is like the legacy markets have to adopt this to work. Because we've done a lot of talking over the past few months, just like idea validation and making sure that we understand the space, so like large corporates and like institutional investors and like users, and like just really trying to get a picture. And like it became super, super apparent that we're in like, not just in ReFi, but like carbon in general is at such this intersection right now where it's like quality, science-based, like actually doing something. And so like there's all of this movement. I think in terms of where it goes, I'm a big believer that I believe that the markets will come on chain, and that people like corporates and institutions will start to put value into the fact that it's been on blockchain and it's had sort of DMRV and it's sort of all of these intersections to come in, and you're able to track this credit throughout its life cycle, and so like just getting rid of the legacy problems, but probably how legacy adopts what's on chain will be interesting. So yeah, that's my current thoughts at the moment. But Andrew, I don't know if you have any.
I'm pretty much on the same page on that one.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I was very open and just receptive to Benoit from Vera. I really wanted to understand his concerns and not push my agenda or anyone else's. I tend to agree. I also think there's just a lot of shearing forces and a lot of tension before we get there. And I think some actors will be more inclined towards embracing the power and sometimes chaos of a public blockchain and permissionless financial systems. And I think there will be some people who prefer walled gardens and don't want the liability of any person in their bedroom building with a carbon credit and who knows what and selling it in, who knows way. I really do think that this market in particular typifies so much of the challenge of getting to a regenerative economic system with corporations as a organization structure and nation states as an organization structure. And so I think there are so many lessons to be learned, but I personally feel that there will be rapid nonlinear change evolve when Web3 native digital measurement, reporting, and verification and on-chain issuance really reaches critical scale. And I think Regen Network's a great example. Open Forest Protocol, the folks at the Open MRV protocol that are building on Celo. Like, there's so many early stage, well capitalized, talented teams, and it'll take time, but when that stuff is rolling, like I think we'll see a similar explosion. And my take is all the time, the working groups, the deliberating, the liability concerns from the likes of legacy institutions, they're going to get swept out of the market before they know it. And it'll be an interesting take as corporate demand catches up to the power of, okay, yep, this is science backed. You can see this credit all the way to project origination. You see the full life cycle. It is incredibly powerful, and the integrity of the on-chain market is going to increase significantly, but it won't be without, idiots building ridiculous Ponzi schemes and things collapsing. And I think it's part of the system, it's part of the chaos. And I personally have, trouble balancing those two vectors, but it's definitely the best place in the climate symphony for me. I love ReFi. It's such a cool spot. And it's grateful to have so many talented builders in the space. And yeah, man, we'll see where it goes. Super excited for you guys to launch. What's the call to action here for people who've heard your story, want to get involved? What do people do? How can people get connected with what's happening at Return?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, DMs are always open. If what you think we're doing is wrong or different, or if you have some thoughts, like feedback is king. Like we're building this for and with you all. So like my Twitter DMs are open, like Return's Twitter DMs are open, like just shoot us a message. In terms of like immediate next steps, go join the waitlist. I'm currently on return.green right now. That will be those will be the first sort of few waves let in beyond the beta, sort of growing fairly quickly. So I would definitely go there soon. And then beyond that, like get in touch, let us know what you think, like, don't like, and if you want to collaborate or partner, like we are super open to sort of I think Adrian from Senkin says this really well, like the only way is together. So we very much subscribe to that as well.
The only way is together. That's great. And I know you guys recently did a round, but for investors in this space, is there going to be future opportunities to get involved and support the growth of Return? What's the kind of roadmap looking like moving forward?
Yeah, we're super open to those conversations as well. So we've started having, we do field stuff. We probably won't be raising any more money. We're in a nice position not to have to for a while, at least until we can figure out what we're doing. But beyond that, I think sort of half, probably middle of next year, we'll be looking to probably go out again. Pending if everyone goes and puts a Soulbound token in their wallet, we might be looking tomorrow. Who knows? But yeah, so yeah, next year, sort of end of Q1, early Q2, probably.
Cool. I'm excited. I'm stoked. I'm definitely on the wait list. Really looking forward to it. And the final section of our time here, I would love to just kind of maybe share learnings and advice for other people in the ecosystem. We've got 70 some founders in the ReFi summer cohort at ReFi DAO. There's a lot of people looking into the space. Like, what would you guys say to people passionate about the climate, maybe people passionate in Web3? Like, what advice would you have for the builders and entrepreneurs out there looking at this space?
I'd say for the builders, something that I've learned quite quickly is don't get bogged down on making it a scalable solution, or don't get bogged down about making sure that it's entirely decentralized and permissionless. If it works and if people want it, you'll have the time to make it perfect. But sometimes making it perfect can take months, or a very long time, or at times even be impossible with the current infrastructure unless you really get down to the ground level and fix things from scratch.
Nice.
I think that's my number one piece
that.
of advice.
Yeah, there seems to be an obsession around decentralization and scalability, but you got to come to those hurdles, and you have to decentralize at the right point. And there's always trade-offs along the way. What would your nugget of advice be, Kieran, either to your former self or a new founder coming into the space?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I think the biggest thing that I've taken away over the last maybe like 6 months. So I started working Return like middle of actually just sort of mid Klima Toucan eruption. So like probably September earlier last year. I think since then, like, and I thought I was in climate tech before. I thought I knew carbon markets. I think to really build something tangible in ReFi, even if it's Web3, I drew like this really strict wall, which was like, if it's not Web3 and if it's not in ReFi, it doesn't exist, it doesn't matter, like it doesn't scale. But that's so not true. And I think like the biggest thing that sort of shifted, and I feel like that for the better of return long term, is like breaking that wall down to like, you have to, where I feel personally is like, you have to be so incredibly like addicted and committed to knowing exactly what goes on off chain, on chain, any chain. Like if it's carbon related and if it's carbon market related, like make sure you know it. Because that's where we fell down initially, quite to detriment of ourselves. It's like, yes, you can probably get people to say it's a good idea because they're your friends or they're like passionate like you are, but like truly understand where you're building and truly understand like what, like we've said it like a few times, but like the tangible problem that you're trying to solve. And I don't know that we've necessarily arrived at our final problem yet. This is just really where we're starting off to prove the thesis. So
Nice.
yeah, know the markets, I would say, and like I'm by no means there yet. I feel like no one is.
Yeah, totally. And I think Toucan and the content they produce seems to be a great resource. Like, what are other places where you guys have wrapped your head around the carbon market? I know Helena and Douglas at Kieran Protocol or at Spirals Protocol have done their own deep dives. Like, what resources were really the most valuable for you, and how can people make sense of the carbon market and the best way to make interventions here?
Yeah, the ReFi podcast has been pretty good, so I'd go and listen to that maybe. Beyond listening to John talk, I would say, which is great. I mean, I would definitely dive into that. What helped me?
Don't trust me.
I think you're modest. I think like just talking to as many people as humanly possible, but like really picking who you talk to and making sure that you try and cover the spectrum of like the carbon markets. But I would say like just getting out there and asking. A bit of a cheat code I've tried to use, and I don't know that this is a cheat code because I haven't seen the results of it yet. Rather than go and talk to like 50 to 100 corporates to test your thesis, talk to a founder that's already talked to them and see what they found out. And maybe it saves you a few hours, and maybe it means your sort of thesis maybe changes in advance. But I mean, like, yeah, all of the sort of traditional working groups, I mean, like, your IATAs of the world put out really like awesome detailed content to read through, and it's just like diving into thorough resources like that and just being prepared to read it, which I feel like is never ending. So yeah, that's been my one, like working groups and like deep dives on where those groups believe it's going, alongside looking at like, I actually, the other day I was sort of diving into which project developers are sort of in the space or diving in space, and like there's lists of like 5,000 developers out there just on Google. Like, wow. The carbon market's been around for a while, so I would definitely just like treat it as a blank slate and download like huge lists and just dive into it. Probably that would be
amazing if you can service that list. I think list of project developers and also list of the verification and validation bodies are just kind of an eye-opener to see who are these actors, how does the value flow into the space. So maybe we can grab that from you, Kieran, and include it in the show notes. But yeah, been a super fun conversation to get a glimpse in your guys' journey. Love what you are doing. So grateful to have you in the space. For anybody listening, check out return.green, sign up for the wait list, and get this soulbound token, make your climate action visible, and let's see where this goes, man. I'm grateful to learn alongside you. Anything else, closing thoughts you want to leave people with before we wrap up?
From me, no. I mean, thank you for listening, and like, I just want to emphasize, like, super, like, my favorite thing is connecting with fellow people in the space that I haven't met before. So, like, always feel free to reach out, and look forward to connecting soon. Andrew, anything from you?
Yeah, same. If you're an aspiring developer in the space and you have a cool idea, don't hesitate to reach out. Though a lot of things take a long time to build, we chose one particularly complex. A lot of them are pretty quick and easy. So talking to other developers who've done it before can really speed up your timeline, and don't hesitate.
Amazing, man. Follow Return Protocol on Twitter, return.green. This is Kieran and Andrew. Appreciate you guys so much, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk after launch and see what's come of it. But I'll let you guys go throughout your day, and we'll see you around.
Awesome. Thank you for having us, John.
Cheers, gents. Peace.